Well, we set up the asset management group 8 years ago, something like that. And the intention was to bring together people who, from different RPs, who were interested in pursuing zero carbon, low carbon technologies, thinking about the future, how we're going to meet our climate change commitments, and that stepped up really in those 8 years. So it was a place to share information, share concerns, to work through some of those issues. And increasingly we've been working through assessing new technology, new funding packages, and have been very much linked into the whole green agenda for Manchester, for the 10 districts and for GM as well.
The key purpose of the Greater Manchester Low Carbon Asset Managers Group is to act as a centre of collaboration and to act as a centre of best practice where landlords that come to the group can share their knowledge from what they've learned in the past on how to deliver, procure and the practical development of low carbon and energy efficiency projects.
Increasingly we're getting more landlords come in and get involved as well, and that's because virtually every landlord now in the city has and in the region has really said we're supporting the climate emergency, the relevant council's climate emergency, and so and I think boards are increasingly saying to their management and to their teams, so where are we on zero carbon, what's our plans, what's our commitment, how are we moving that forward? So there's a sense of urgency, I think, increasingly now.
In 2010 we didn't have a single property that had any renewable energy in it at all. By 2015 we were able to boast that nearly 40% of our housing stock had at least one form of renewable energy. Generally saying we expect our carbon footprint to have reduced by about 90% from the gas equivalent as it was before.
One of the main ones we did was the first one of its kind in respect of a ground shared array serving individual heat pumps at a multi-storey block in Manchester. That was done about 4 or 5 years ago, and yeah, it was the first of its kind and really innovative, so we took a risk on that one, but it worked well. Generally, I mean, the carbon reductions are huge. Yeah. A lot of residents have reported increased comfort levels as well, because the different ambient temperatures in the property, the lower running temperatures, and the fact that they're just leaving the systems to run themselves is good.
Social landlords are motivated as much by tackling fuel poverty as they are by reducing carbon. You know, that's an important part of what we do, and so we want to move forward that agenda. And it's almost two sides of the same coin: zero carbon and tackling fuel poverty.
So around about 2018, there was mention that Procure Plus was leading on this as a scheme, and the fact that it was collaborative working meant that was of interest to us. You know, there's some big challenges ahead in subjects such as climate change and trying to kickstart the economy now from a post-COVID era. So if you're going to take on challenges like that, you know, we strongly believe that you have to do it in collaboration with others. So that's you know, the HAES Project ticks all of those boxes for us.
We decided to involve ourselves in the combined effort to help more measures go into homes in the Greater Manchester area. So yeah, it was that collaborative approach and combined approach that allowed us to do more measures and increase learning really from the schemes.
The concept of what we're trying to achieve here is what we do collectively with that technology. We're taking the concept of not just looking at as a house, as a home that gives us shelter, but looking at as a house as almost an energy cell that allows us to generate energy and in some cases distribute that energy back to the grid, giving that grid balance if we need, and that is proof of concept. So I think that the legacy will be, if we can get this right in terms of how we balance with the grid and how we view a home as an energy cell, then we have the potential to create a blueprint of how to invest in this technology at scale going forward.
For Northwards, I think it's the learning and the monitoring. We've done other schemes where we've got details from those schemes, but to really push forward on the zero carbon agenda now, we really need to get the monitoring and the information from the HAES project and all the measures that we're undertaking. I think that'll allow us to push forward as a business and make sure that we can carry on with the zero carbon approach with the backup of the information for all of the parties, so we can show how it works, how well it works, and what benefits it brings to the residents.
As we are installing those technologies now, we do have to make sure that the insulation's right, and we do have to get the right mix of renewable technology, such as an air source heat pump and maybe some solar panels and batteries as well, to offset those costs, so that we can really walk away and say not only have we achieved carbon, but we've actually made that customer's fuel bills cheaper in doing so. So the aspiration is that by 2023, we won't be installing any new gas systems. It will be this type of technology. Essentially, it'll be mainly heat pumps, potentially with PV and possibly even with batteries. The reason why we picked 2023 is we wanted to show leadership in action, and also, if the last of the gas boilers are going in by 2023, that means they're going to be coming out by 2038, which aligns with Greater Manchester's net zero carbon target by 2038.
I think we've got massive plans for the 2038 zero carbon targets. We've had a consultants report done where we need to spend a lot of money to bring them to zero carbon, but I think the learning from the HAES project will allow us to make further commitments, and the first one of which will be that we don't want to put any more gas installations into our properties. So I think the learning from the HAES heat pump initiatives will allow us to make that commitment fully. We're about 90% there at the minute, but we just need to tell a few more people how good this new innovations are, and then we can proceed from there and make further commitments. Moving forward, it'll probably be behavioural change around residents, because it is a different way to use the system, and you only really see the benefits if you tell the residents to use it correctly. So we're doing a lot of work from northwards in respect of let the systems run themselves, get the settings right at the beginning, and also get the residents on the right tariffs once we've made the change away from gas and onto the electric meter. So it's important that we get the residents involved in that and make sure that they're on the right tariffs to see the savings that they can make on the infrastructure that we're putting in the properties.
Last year we supported over 700 people into employment, most of that with training. That's not just 700 people who are probably going to get a job anyway. We have priority groups. They're set by us and our board, and those are people who have experience of being the most distant from the labour market. So these are over 700 people who have had really significant barriers to entering the labour market, and we've been able to move those people not just onto a day one start of a job, but actually over 90% of those people were still in work 6 months later, and those who undertake apprenticeships and training positions overwhelmingly go on to complete those positions. Because of the frameworks that are being used, with the amount of spend that's going through at the moment, we're looking at sort of between £9 and £10 million. I'd be expecting between 15 and 20 trainees immediately to be engaged on those programmes. So those could be apprentices, or those could be people following other recognised accredited training alongside paid employment. So it's not just our work that's happening. Our work is the initial catalyst, and then other construction work that's happening locally, we can work with those contractors as well. So actually off the back of HAES, immediately, 15 to 20 jobs. But more broadly, I'd be looking at 2 or 3 times that amount that would be being created because of that catalyst.
We developed the climate change strategy. It was a decision that we made last year to make this a group collaborative strategy, and it seemed a logical step because the group is a centre of collaboration. The plans that had already come out of the GMCA, so we used the Smart Energy Plan, the Retrofit Plan and the 5-year environmental plan, and took the targets that were set in those.
There's a real imperative now, I think. I think there's a real change, particularly during COVID. I think there's a real greater recognition of the importance of the environment, how we actually, can use the environment in a more sustainable way. There's also a ticking clock. GM has committed itself to zero carbon by 2038, which is in advance of the government's 2050 target. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we know unless we start acting now, we're not going to achieve that. We need to move on with that agenda.
And so hopefully it will direct policy in a way that supports the landlords making these changes. It will advise local stakeholders as well, such as the DNO and planning authorities, what they need to prepare for and what support they'll need to facilitate the transition to low carbon. It will also indicate to supply chain that there is a demand for low carbon.
A relatively swift forecast exercise that we undertook with a small number of our landlords, that returned, I think, a desired spend in excess of 140 million quid just for a few technologies. So that's our own little bit of research. But equally, and again through the activities of the Low Carbon Asset Managers Group, we became aware of a report that was been produced by the Greater Manchester Business Growth Hub, which specifically explored supply chain opportunities for those companies operating in this sector. Of the 13, from memory, landlords that responded to this independent piece of research, they identified over 500 million quid's worth of spend on things like cavity wall insulation, air source heat pumps, external wall insulation, the things that really, I suppose, contribute to a low carbon built environment over the next 5 years, over the next 5 years, so 100 million quid a year's worth of spend. I think that's quite an opportunity. So that 500 million quid's worth of stuff that I mentioned earlier, landlords had committed to procuring that particular kind of service before Green Homes Grant was announced, before Clean Homes Grant, the successor to the Renewable Heating Incentive, before that was even published. So, £500 million worth of low carbon goods and services, but for the right reasons. The most recent things that we're doing, things being that technical catch-all term, is the procurement of a new low carbon technologies framework. So PP were the first organisation to have a purely social housing dedicated ground source heat pump framework. That's due to expire next calendar year. So we're refreshing that. What more can we do? How can we add extra value to our customers and to market from this procurement? And it became quite apparent that certainly post-COVID, or in the height of lockdown, there were a lot of thoughts and thinking about how do we kickstart the local economy, these COVID economic recovery action plans and all that kind of stuff. And it became quite apparent that a number of our strategic stakeholders, like the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, like our social landlords themselves, there's an acceptance that to an extent SMEs, smaller local businesses, will drive the COVID economic recovery when lockdown's restricted. And it's a cracking way of delivering low carbon stuff as well. Going to market for ground source heat pumps in a number of different applications. Regional air source heat pump lotting, so there'll be something specific for the Northwest, and again through working with the likes of the Greater Manchester Growth Hub, the Business Growth Hub and Chambers of Commerce, we want to get as many local companies on that framework as possible. And PV and battery installations, again, regionally, to reflect the desire to support local economies to grow and recover.